The most dangerous mistake a person can make is believing they already know the truth before they have heard the whole story. Marcus Reynolds learned that lesson years ago, but on a quiet afternoon in Virginia, someone else was about to learn it for the first time. The man sitting behind the wheel of a simple sedan looked like anyone else driving through the neighborhood. There was nothing about his calm expression, his plain clothing, or his quiet presence that revealed the responsibility he carried every day. To the outside world, Marcus was just another person passing through. But hidden behind that ordinary appearance was a career built on investigation, discipline, and service. Marcus was a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a position that required patience, attention to detail, and the ability to see beyond first impressions. Yet Marcus never introduced himself through his title. He never believed a badge made someone more valuable than another person. To him, a badge represented responsibility, not superiority. After more than a decade of working in difficult investigations, Marcus understood something many people forgot. The first thing someone noticed was rarely the complete truth. A person could carry years of experience, sacrifice, and dedication without anyone around them knowing. That was why Marcus valued listening before speaking and understanding before judging. It was a principle that guided both his professional life and his personal choices. On that same afternoon, Officer Ryan Mitchell was completing his regular patrol duties. Ryan had spent years as a police officer and believed strongly in the importance of experience. He trusted his ability to recognize situations quickly and make decisions based on what he observed. Like many professionals, Ryan believed that his training helped him notice details others might miss. He did not see himself as someone looking for conflict. He saw himself as someone trying to do his job correctly. But every person has moments when their understanding is incomplete. And sometimes the smallest assumptions can hide the biggest truths. When Ryan noticed Marcus, he saw only what was visible in front of him. He did not see the years Marcus had spent serving the country. He did not see the cases Marcus had handled or the responsibility connected to the badge hidden away from public view. He only saw a moment, a person, and a situation that seemed familiar. Marcus noticed the officer approaching and immediately understood the importance of remaining calm. He had experienced enough in life to know that reactions could change the direction of any conversation. He believed respect was strongest when it was shown even before it was returned. As the two men began speaking, neither one realized that this simple encounter would become a powerful reminder about perception, authority, and the importance of seeing people for who they truly are. Ryan believed he was meeting an ordinary citizen. Marcus knew that the truth was often much deeper than what appeared on the surface. And before the day was over, one of them would discover that the person he thought he understood was someone he had never truly seen. Before Marcus Reynolds became the person standing calmly in that Virginia neighborhood, he had spent years learning one of the hardest lessons in public service. The truth is rarely found in the first few seconds of an encounter. His career with the Federal Bureau of Investigation had taught him that every situation contained details people could not immediately see. A person's background, responsibilities, and experiences were often hidden behind an ordinary appearance. That understanding shaped the way Marcus moved through the world. He did not expect special treatment because of his position. He did not believe people should respect him only after discovering his title. Marcus believed respect was something every person deserved from the beginning. His journey to becoming a special agent was built on years of dedication. He had studied investigations, developed careful observation skills, and learned how important patience could be when searching for the truth. In his work, he often encountered situations where assumptions created confusion and where the full picture only appeared after someone took the time to ask the right questions. Those experiences changed the way Marcus viewed people. He knew that everyone carried a story that others could not immediately see. That belief was the reason he kept his professional life private when he was away from official duties. Marcus wanted people to see him as a person first, not simply as someone carrying a government position. He valued quiet moments, simple conversations, and the ability to move through everyday life without constantly being defined by his career. Meanwhile, Officer Ryan Mitchell had developed his own perspective through years of police work. Ryan believed strongly in preparation and experience. He had spent countless hours learning how to evaluate situations, communicate with people, and make decisions under pressure. He considered those skills essential to serving his community. Ryan was not looking for a reason to judge someone unfairly. He believed he was simply responding to the information available in front of him. But experience could only reveal what someone had already learned to notice. Sometimes the most important details were the ones people had not yet considered. As Ryan approached Marcus, he saw a situation that appeared familiar. He saw a person, a location, and a moment that seemed easy to understand. What he did not see was the larger story behind the man standing in front of him. He did not see Marcus's years of service, his professional responsibilities, or the quiet discipline that shaped his actions. Marcus, however, understood something Ryan had not yet discovered. A person's value did not increase when others finally recognized it. It existed from the beginning. The conversation between them remained calm, but beneath the surface, an important lesson was beginning to form. Marcus knew that moments like this were not changed by anger or confrontation. They were changed when people had the opportunity to see beyond their first impression. Ryan believed he understood the situation in front of him. Marcus knew there was still a much larger story waiting to be revealed. The conversation between Marcus Reynolds and Officer Ryan Mitchell continued, and what appeared to be a simple exchange slowly became something neither man expected. Ryan remained focused on the situation in front of him, relying on the experience that had guided him throughout his career. He believed careful observation and quick decisions were important parts of being responsible. But as the conversation moved forward, he began noticing details that did not fit the first impression he had created. Marcus was different from what Ryan expected. He was calm, respectful, and patient. He did not appear nervous or frustrated. He did not try to control the conversation or use any information that could immediately change the way Ryan viewed him. Instead, Marcus simply answered questions and allowed the process to continue naturally. That calm approach caught Ryan's attention because it revealed something unusual. Many people reacted strongly when they felt misunderstood. They tried to explain themselves immediately or prove that others were wrong. Marcus did neither. He seemed completely comfortable allowing the facts to speak for themselves. Throughout his career, Marcus had learned that patience often revealed more than quick reactions. In the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he had seen many situations where the first version of a story was incomplete. A single detail could change the entire understanding of an event. A person who appeared ordinary could have an extraordinary background. A moment that seemed simple could contain a much deeper meaning. Those lessons stayed with him during this encounter. Ryan continued observing Marcus, trying to understand why the interaction felt different. He noticed the confidence in Marcus's voice and the respect in his responses. There was no attempt to create conflict. There was only a quiet certainty that the situation would eventually become clear. Ryan started to consider whether he had formed his opinion too quickly. He thought about how often people rely on the information immediately available to them. He knew that experience was valuable, but he also understood that experience could sometimes create expectations. The ability to recognize patterns was useful, but every person and every situation was still unique. Marcus noticed the change in Ryan's approach, but did not comment on it. He understood that awareness had to come naturally. People rarely changed their perspective because someone demanded it. They changed when they discovered something for themselves. That was why Marcus remained patient. He believed that the strongest lessons were often the ones people reached on their own. Around them, the neighborhood continued as usual. Cars passed through the streets, residents continued their daily routines, and most people nearby had no idea that a meaningful moment was unfolding. To anyone watching from a distance, it looked like an ordinary conversation between a police officer and a citizen. But beneath the surface, both men were experiencing something different. Ryan was beginning to understand that the person in front of him carried a story much larger than he could see. Marcus was once again reminded of why patience and dignity mattered. He knew that truth did not always appear immediately. Sometimes it arrived through a small detail, a careful question, or a moment when someone finally decided to look deeper. And as the conversation continued, Ryan was getting closer to discovering the detail that would completely change his understanding of Marcus Reynolds. The afternoon continued quietly, but something had changed in the way Officer Ryan Mitchell viewed the situation. What began as a routine interaction was becoming a moment of reflection. Ryan had always trusted his ability to recognize important details quickly. His years in law enforcement taught him that awareness mattered and that every decision carried responsibility. But now, standing across from Marcus Reynolds, he was beginning to understand that awareness was not only about noticing what was visible. It was also about recognizing what might be hidden. Marcus remained calm throughout the conversation. He understood that people often created opinions based on limited information because that was part of human nature. However, he also knew that those first impressions could be incomplete. A person could never be fully understood by a single moment, a single question, or a single assumption. Marcus had spent years in the Federal Bureau of Investigation learning that every situation required patience. Facts needed time to appear. Details needed careful attention. And the truth often existed beyond what people first believed. Ryan continued reviewing the information available to him. Something about Marcus's responses made him pause. The man was not acting like someone trying to avoid questions. He was not trying to make the conversation difficult. Instead, Marcus appeared confident because he knew exactly who he was and what he represented. That confidence created curiosity in Ryan's mind. He began looking more carefully at the details surrounding the interaction. A small piece of information caught his attention. It was not a complete answer, but it suggested there was more to Marcus's story than he originally understood. Ryan had learned throughout his career that small details could sometimes reveal the biggest differences. He decided to verify the information instead of relying only on his first impression. Marcus noticed Ryan becoming more thoughtful, but he remained silent. He knew this moment was not about proving someone wrong. It was about allowing understanding to develop naturally. Marcus had seen many situations where people focused only on defending their own perspective. But real progress happened when someone was willing to ask, listen, and reconsider. That was something Marcus valued deeply. He believed accountability did not begin with blame. It began with honesty. As Ryan continued checking the information, he started thinking about the assumptions people make every day. Sometimes those assumptions happen so quickly that people do not even recognize them. A person sees a small part of a story and believes they understand the entire picture. But life is rarely that simple. Every individual carries experiences, responsibilities, and personal history that remain invisible to others. The neighborhood remained peaceful around them. The sound of passing vehicles and ordinary conversations continued in the background. Nobody nearby realized that a quiet exchange was creating a meaningful change in perspective. To anyone watching, it was just another conversation between an officer and a citizen. But for Ryan, it was becoming something different. It was becoming a reminder that professionalism required more than confidence. It required the humility to recognize when there was still something left to learn. And as he looked deeper into Marcus Reynolds' background, Ryan was about to discover a truth that would completely change the way he understood the person standing in front of him. The information officer Ryan Mitchell discovered was not dramatic at first. It was simply a collection of details that slowly began changing the way he understood the situation. As he reviewed the information connected to Marcus Reynolds, Ryan realized that the person standing in front of him was far different from the person he had imagined at the beginning of their conversation. Marcus had never tried to create a different impression of himself. He had not used his position to influence the interaction. He had simply allowed the truth to appear when the right moment arrived. Ryan looked again at the information in front of him and began to understand why Marcus carried himself with such confidence and patience. The man was not calm because he was trying to hide something. He was calm because he understood exactly who he was and what responsibilities he carried. Marcus Reynolds was a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a professional whose career was built around searching for facts, protecting fairness, and understanding situations completely before reaching conclusions. For Ryan, the discovery created a moment of reflection. The person he had been speaking with was not suddenly important because of a title or a badge. Marcus had been valuable from the beginning. The badge only revealed a part of the story that had always existed. Marcus noticed the change in Ryan's expression but did not react with pride or satisfaction. He had never wanted the moment to become about proving someone wrong. His purpose was not to make another person feel embarrassed. His purpose was to allow the truth to be understood. Throughout his career, Marcus had learned that meaningful lessons were not created through humiliation. They were created through awareness and the willingness to see beyond assumptions. Ryan thought about the beginning of the encounter. He remembered how quickly he believed he understood what was happening. He remembered how easy it was to create a conclusion based on limited information. Now he recognized something important. Experience was valuable, but experience also required balance. A person could have years of training and still need the humility to consider what they might not know. The realization stayed with him. The conversation was no longer simply about verifying information. It became a reminder about the responsibility that came with authority. A badge, whether worn by a police officer or carried by a federal agent, represented a duty to serve people fairly. It was not a symbol that placed one person above another. It was a reminder that every decision mattered. Marcus and Ryan continued their conversation with a different understanding between them. The dynamic had changed, but Marcus remained the same person he had been from the start. His patience had not come from knowing he had power. It came from knowing that dignity did not depend on how others responded. As the afternoon continued, Ryan realized that the biggest discovery was not Marcus's professional identity. The biggest discovery was the lesson behind it. Every person deserved to be understood before being judged. Every story deserved to be heard before conclusions were made. And sometimes, the person who seems the least powerful at first may be the person carrying the greatest responsibility. The discovery of Marcus Reynolds' identity changed the atmosphere of the conversation, but it also opened the door to a much larger question. What if the situation was not only about one misunderstanding between two individuals? What if the moment represented something deeper about how people make decisions when they only see a small part of the truth? Officer Ryan Mitchell continued thinking about the encounter long after the initial surprise had passed. He understood that Marcus was not just someone with an impressive career. He was someone whose actions revealed the values behind that career. The most important part was not the Federal Bureau of Investigation badge. It was the patience, professionalism, and respect Marcus showed before anyone knew about it. Marcus knew that moments like this often revealed more about people than any official statement could. He had spent years working in environments where details mattered and where conclusions had to be based on facts rather than assumptions. That experience taught him that individual decisions were often connected to larger patterns. A single conversation could reveal the importance of training, awareness, and accountability. As Marcus continued speaking with Ryan, he carefully explained that his concern was not about receiving special treatment. He did not believe anyone should be treated differently because of a title or position. The real lesson was that every person deserved to be approached with fairness from the beginning. Ryan listened carefully. For the first time, he began looking beyond the immediate encounter and considering the bigger picture. He thought about how many interactions happen every day where people are seen only through a limited perspective. He thought about how quickly assumptions could influence decisions before all the facts were available. The realization was uncomfortable, but it was also important. Growth often begins when people are willing to examine their own actions honestly. Marcus did not accuse Ryan or attempt to create conflict. Instead, he focused on the responsibility that came with any position of authority. Whether someone carried a police badge or a federal badge, the purpose should always be service. Authority was not meant to create distance between people. It was meant to create trust. Ryan recognized that Marcus's approach was different from what he expected. The conversation could have become defensive, but Marcus chose understanding instead. That choice made the message stronger. It showed that real confidence did not require someone to prove they were powerful. It required someone to know their values and remain consistent with them. As the afternoon moved forward, a deeper story began to emerge. Marcus's presence in the neighborhood was not simply a random moment. There were reasons he paid attention to details and reasons his professional instincts were so carefully developed. Ryan did not yet know the full extent of what Marcus was connected to, but he understood one important thing. The situation was larger than he first believed. The person he originally saw as just another citizen was actually someone who represented a much bigger responsibility. And as more information became clear, Ryan was about to discover that the truth behind Marcus Reynolds was connected to a story far beyond one conversation. The moment between Marcus Reynolds and Officer Ryan Mitchell had started as a simple encounter, but the meaning behind it continued to grow as more pieces of the story became visible. Ryan now understood that Marcus's identity was only one part of the truth. The greater lesson was about how easily people could misunderstand situations when they relied only on what they could see. Marcus had spent years working with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and his experience taught him that important answers were often found beneath the surface. He knew that a single event rarely showed the complete picture. Behind every decision was a reason. Behind every person was a story. As Ryan reflected on what had happened, he began looking at the situation from a wider perspective. He thought about the responsibility that came with wearing a badge. He realized that authority was not only about having the ability to make decisions. It was also about understanding the impact those decisions could have on others. Marcus had demonstrated that principle without making a speech or demanding recognition. His actions showed that true professionalism came from patience and fairness. During their conversation, Marcus shared that his work often involved examining complicated situations where facts were not always immediately clear. He explained that investigations required careful attention because early assumptions could sometimes hide important information. The same principle applied to everyday interactions. People needed to be willing to ask questions, listen carefully, and consider possibilities beyond their first impression. Ryan listened closely because he recognized that this lesson applied not only to this moment but to his entire career. He had always believed that experience helped him understand situations quickly. Now he realized that experience also required continuous learning. The strongest professionals were not those who believed they knew everything. They were the ones who remained open to discovering something new. Marcus's calm approach made that message even stronger. He had every opportunity to reveal his position at the beginning of the conversation, but he chose not to. He wanted the interaction to be based on fairness rather than influence. He believed people should not receive respect only after others discover their accomplishments. Respect should exist before any achievement becomes known. As Ryan considered those words, he began to understand the difference between authority and leadership. Authority could come from a position, but leadership came from character. Marcus carried a federal badge, but the most meaningful thing he demonstrated was integrity. The afternoon remained quiet around them, but the conversation represented something much larger. It became a reminder that systems and organizations were shaped by individual choices. Every interaction mattered. Every decision created an impression. Every moment was an opportunity to either reinforce assumptions or challenge them. Ryan did not yet know how much bigger the situation would become, but he understood that Marcus's presence was connected to something beyond their conversation. There was a reason a Federal Bureau of Investigation agent was paying attention to details that others might overlook. There was a reason this ordinary afternoon had become a moment neither man would forget. And soon, Ryan would discover that the truth Marcus carried was connected to a much larger responsibility. The conversation between Marcus Reynolds and Officer Ryan Mitchell had changed both men in different ways, but the story surrounding that quiet afternoon was still unfolding. What Ryan discovered about Marcus was only the beginning of a much larger understanding. The Federal Bureau of Investigation agent was not simply someone with a respected position. He was someone who had spent years studying how decisions were made, how systems operated, and how important it was to recognize the difference between assumptions and facts. Marcus knew that one conversation could reveal more than people expected. He also knew that meaningful change did not come from embarrassment or conflict. It came from reflection and a willingness to improve. As the day continued, Marcus began explaining why he had always believed in looking beyond the surface. His work had shown him that problems within organizations rarely appeared all at once. They often developed through small choices, repeated habits, and moments when people failed to question what seemed normal. Ryan listened carefully because he realized the lesson was bigger than their personal interaction. It was about responsibility at every level. A badge represented trust. It represented a promise to serve others fairly. Whether someone wore a police badge or carried a federal badge, the purpose remained the same: protecting the values those symbols represented. Marcus explained that accountability was not about finding someone to blame. It was about identifying what needed to improve and making sure the same mistakes were not repeated. Ryan considered those words carefully. He thought about his own career and the many decisions he had made over the years. He had always believed he was doing his duty, but he began to understand that good intentions alone were not enough. Responsible service also required awareness, reflection, and the courage to recognize areas where improvement was possible. Marcus appreciated that Ryan was willing to listen. He knew that not everyone responded to difficult conversations with openness. Some people protected their pride instead of examining their actions. But growth required honesty. It required the ability to accept that even experienced professionals could learn something new. As the conversation continued, Marcus revealed that his presence in the area was connected to a broader responsibility. His attention to detail was not accidental. His questions and observations came from years of professional training and experience. He was not there simply as a person passing through. He was there because understanding the full picture mattered. Ryan realized that the encounter had been part of something much larger than he first believed. The situation was not only about one interaction between an officer and a citizen. It was about how systems were influenced by the choices of individuals. Every decision, every conversation, and every assumption could create consequences beyond the moment itself. The neighborhood remained quiet, but the meaning of the day had changed completely. Marcus continued to carry himself with the same patience and dignity he had shown from the beginning. Ryan continued thinking about what he had learned. He understood that the greatest lesson was not about discovering a hidden title. It was about recognizing the humanity that existed before any title was revealed. And as more information became available, Ryan was about to discover that Marcus's involvement was connected to a truth that extended far beyond their first meeting. The encounter between Marcus Reynolds and Officer Ryan Mitchell became a reminder that the most important moments in life are not always the loudest ones. Sometimes a quiet conversation can reveal lessons that stay with people for years. What began as a simple interaction on an ordinary afternoon became a powerful example of how truth, patience, and understanding can change the way people see each other. Marcus continued his work with the same dedication that had guided him throughout his career. As a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he understood that responsibility was not measured by recognition. It was measured by the choices a person made when nobody was watching. The badge he carried represented his duty, but his character represented who he truly was. Marcus never wanted people to respect him only because of his position. He wanted people to understand that respect should exist before any title was known. Ryan carried the memory of that day with him as well. He realized that the biggest lesson was not about discovering that Marcus held an important role. The lesson was about what happened before that discovery. Before the badge was revealed, Marcus was already patient. Before his background was known, Marcus was already deserving of dignity. Before anyone understood his responsibilities, he was already a person who deserved to be treated fairly. That realization changed Ryan's perspective. He understood that every interaction created a choice. People could choose to rely only on what they saw, or they could choose to search for the complete story. They could choose quick assumptions, or they could choose thoughtful understanding. The difference between those choices could change everything. Marcus knew that true justice was not about creating winners and losers. It was about creating a world where people were willing to recognize each other's humanity. He had spent his career searching for facts, but he also understood the importance of compassion. Facts revealed what happened, Character revealed how people responded. The lesson from that afternoon reached beyond two individuals. It became a reminder that organizations were shaped by the people inside them. A badge carried responsibility. A position carried expectations. And every person who held authority had the opportunity to use it with fairness and integrity. Ryan understood that professional growth was not about believing he would never make mistakes. It was about being willing to learn when those mistakes became visible. That willingness was what allowed people and institutions to become stronger. Marcus and Ryan left that encounter with a different understanding of each other. Neither man was defined by a single moment. Marcus was more than the badge he carried. Ryan was more than the first impression he created. Both were people capable of reflection, learning, and change. The world often moves quickly, and people often make judgments before knowing the complete story. But every person carries a history that cannot be seen immediately. Every person has experiences that shape who they are. And sometimes, the greatest lesson comes when someone discovers that the truth was never hidden because it was impossible to find. It was hidden because nobody had taken the time to truly look. Marcus Reynolds carried his badge as a symbol of service. Ryan Mitchell carried forward a new understanding of responsibility. And the quiet moment they shared became a lasting reminder that justice does not begin with power. It begins with seeing people clearly.